Okay, this is going to be a fun one. We're going to fly from Melbourne International to Canberra in the CRJ in Microsoft Flight Simulator, which has just been updated to World Update 8. And we're going to see how we get on and see whether the sim crashes on its backside or if it does a faultless flight and we get to fly to the destination. Okay, so let's go and get in the CRJ and see how we go. I'll try and describe things I'm doing as we go. So if you've never flown the CRJ before, I'll go step by step. So the first thing we need to do is provide some power to the systems, so we turn on the master battery. The next thing we need to do is turn on the auxiliary power unit, which will provide electricity and compressed air to spin the engines up when it's time to do so. So we can start the APU and open the flap for it. So that's both of these buttons here. If we look outside at the back of the plane here, you can see a flap opening up and you'll see hot air start pouring out. So there's a small jet engine in the back of the plane. That's the auxiliary power unit. So while we're waiting for that to fire up, we can come down to the central pedestal, move this arm out of the way, and we can move or turn both of these knobs here to nav. This is the IRS system. It's basically the inertial guidance system of the aircraft, so it kind of knows where it is in the sky by using gyros to do that, to measure differences in the plane's movement to do so, which makes the navigation very, very accurate. That takes a couple of minutes to fire up. Also, while we're waiting for the auxiliary power unit to come online, we can go and click the ELEC button down here, and this will give us the status of it on the page. So you can see the auxiliary power unit is up and running. We can actually hear it in the cockpit now. So if we go and click this back to status, so this screen will now show us general status of the aircraft, which is really useful for us because it shows us things we haven't done yet. Obviously we can see a master caution flashing because there are some things that don't look right as far as the avionics are concerned, and it's basically because the engines aren't running. Okay, we have the APU running. We can go and switch on air conditioning. We can turn on air recycling, or recirculation is the proper term for it. We can turn on the fuel pumps ready for when we start the engines. We can also turn on the windshield heating to low, so if we were to fly through freezing cloud, which is a distinct possibility at altitude, then we won't have any surprises. We can turn the hydraulics to automatic, so that basically gives us power over the control surfaces. We turn on the lights, nav, beacon, strobe, and we can turn the emergency, or we can arm the emergency lights. We can turn on the seatbelt signs and the no smoking signs. And overhead, apart from starting the engines, that's about it. So at this point we would do pushback, because we can't do the yaw damper, stab trim and mac trim until we have started the engines. So at this point I'm going to go in here. I've got a small add-on that makes the pushback a bit of a nicer experience than the stock flight sim experience, so we can say start the pushback.
Cockpit to ground.
This is ground. Stand by.
So they're just going to drive the truck up and they'll tell us when they are hooked up, and then we can have some control over our pushback. So just give them a moment to do that. You can see the animation isn't perfect. It doesn't always grab the aircraft in the correct place. There it goes.
Okay, sir. The bypass pin is installed. All doors and hatches closed and all ground equipment is removed.
The parking brakes are set. You may lift.
Parking brake set. Lifting the aircraft.
So you can see the nose is gently coming up of the aircraft.
Standing by for pushback.
So we can say we want to go backwards.
Cockpit to ground.
Oh, something else we need to do.
We are cleared for start and push. Parking brake set.
We need to come in here and remove the chocks, otherwise they're not going to be able to push the aircraft back. It's something that's unique to the CRJ. We can release the parking brake. which means they
Parking
can then
brakes are
push us.
released.
Commencing pushback. You can start the engines in sequence.
It
Okay.
will start in the sequence.
So while they're pushing back, they've said we can start the engines. So we'll click the engine start buttons. We will also move them to idle on their travel and make sure we have free movement of them. We do. And outside we can steer the pushback, which is quite cool. Yeah, so we can move this roller and steer our pushback to get us into the right place. So the engines are firing up while we're moving back, which is good. Obviously once the engines are running, they provide power to the aircraft themselves. So it's kind of like bootstrapping the system using the APU. So once we have the engines running, we can switch the APU off. I'm not doing a very good job of steering along the yellow line here, am I? But it doesn't really matter. It's a simulator. We haven't programmed the flight in either yet, so I'm massively out of order with a lot of these things. We'll just park up quietly on the concrete over here and quickly bash the flight plan into the flight computer. It won't take long. Okay, so we're still being pushed back. We can turn the APU off now because the engines are running. And we can go for the yaw dampers, the stab trim and the mac trim. You can see all the warnings apart from the spoilers are good. Okay, so let's have a look outside and see where we are. We will stop the pushback.
Okay, pushback completed. Please set your parking brake.
He wants us to set the parking brake again, so inside we can do that here as well.
Parking
So
brake
that
set.
corresponds with this little
Parking
plug-in.
brake set. Lowering aircraft.
So we can get rid of that. Okay, so let's go and quickly program our route while we're sat here. I should have done this before the pushback, really. So we can pick up the FMS position and put it into set position. We can put the destination airport in, which is YMML for Melbourne. And we can go to the flight plan page and we can put in YMML is the aircraft, the airfield we are leaving. And the destination is, looking into little nav map, YSCB. So YSCB is our destination for today. Now we can go to performance initialization. We are going to cruise at, let me have a look at this one, nav map, 29,000 feet. And fuel we are carrying, now I can never work this out unless we can find it out from the panel over here. Performance, is this going to tell us what fuel we have on board? Zero fuel weight, fuel 4467 kilograms, there we go. So that should be 4467 is what we've actually got. And we can execute those changes and we can go next page. We don't need to worry about any of this or any of that. So if we go into the DEP-R, so departure arrival section, we can say we want to leave, to do this flight plan that I've sketched out in this nav map, we're leaving on runway 16 using the Docel 1 standard instrument departure. So runway 16 and the Docel 1 standard instrument departure. So that's programmed that. And we can execute it, which turns it into a solid line on the display. We can then go back to the departure arrival page and to arrivals, and we can pre-program the arrival into Canberra, runway 35, using ILS and the Poly 8A. So runway 35 on the ILS, so it's not listed yet, so we keep on looking down. 35 ILS, Pol 8A, is that the right one? Let's just carry on. Yes, it is. So I thought it said Poly, but maybe that's, or is it Pol 18? Let's just make sure. No, that's the one that we've got. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there between little nav map and the systems in the aircraft. But anyway, this looks good, so execute this. Go and look in the legs page, and you can see there's the standard instrument departure. If we go next, you can see there's a discontinuity in between the end of the standard instrument departure and the beginning of the standard approach route. So I've got some extra waypoints I want to put in. So there's Bull A, B-U-L-L-A. Basically, I put this in a wizard in little nav map where I said, please can you keep me in the high altitude airways en route, please. So it put some extra waypoints in to do that. So Nabba, N-A-B-B-A, and then Rumi, R-U-M-I-E, R-U-M-I-E. Put that in there. And next page, is there any more for us? And Tanta, T-A-N-T-A, and we program that one in, and it's giving us a choice of 2 of them. We can actually check this one. We can see a reference distance, so I'm guessing it's going to be the one that's 200 miles away, not the one that's 4,000 miles away. So it's the top one. So we still have a discontinuity that we don't need anymore, so we can del and select the discontinuity, and that closes it up. And let's just have a flick through. There's another one at the end, so we'll go and delete that discontinuity. We'll also delete the vectoring, and we will go next page. So it all looks good now. There's no discontinuities, there's no vectorings in the middle of the plan, so we execute that, and we now have a completed flight plan. Okay, did we actually tell him to go away yet? We ought to do that, didn't we? Was he waiting for us to put the parking brake on? Okay, stop the pushback. Is he going to go away? Yeah, there he goes. I think that was a bit of a glitch, actually. Shouldn't have done that, should it? Okay, hopefully he'll pull away to the side. There he goes, leaving us free to pull out onto the runway. Now we need to arrange also our climb out. So to do this, we need to see the master control panel for the autopilot and this screen, because we're going to set our climb to, what was it, 29,000 feet we programmed in earlier, didn't we? So I'm rolling the altitude knob, and you can see the number changing here. So this is our target altitude for the autopilot. So we're going to go for 29,000 feet. We're also going to climb to it using speed mode. So we're going to click speed, and you can see CLB 40 has turned up. That means 40 knots. I'd like to see this plane try to climb at 40 knots. So we're going to increase the rate of climb to 250 knots. So we will climb at 250 knots until we get to 10,000 feet, and then we will accelerate further. We also need to, so that's our target altitude and rate of getting there sorted out. We are going to use Nav Mode, which basically means the autopilot is going to follow the programmed flight plan. We're also going to adjust the QNH, or the barometric pressure the altimeter is using for the local barometric pressure. So I'm going to press B, and it was already correct. Okay, so the system is still saying the parking brake is on. So we will go and release the parking brake, and we will go and have a look now at the layout of this airfield. We are going to runway 16, so we need to taxi out of here along the taxiway to the edge of runway 16, or to the end of runway 16. So we're going to go left, right, left. Okay. So let's start steering. And we can get a bit nicer view, or some other air traffic moving over there. Hopefully we won't run into them on the way to the runway. So yeah, this is my first flight with World Update 8, so it's going to be interesting to see how we go. So while we're travelling towards the runway, we'll put the flaps to takeoff position. So you can see flaps are travelling down here, so the leading edge has extended, and now the first part of the trailing edge of the flaps has extended, which would be perfect for takeoff. So let's go and have a look at the map so you can see where we're going. We are the yellow aircraft on the map. We are heading down the taxiway, and we'll take the first on the left. We're just going to cross the runway. We're not anticipating anything being around today because we don't have ATC, and I've chosen a server that's very quiet on purpose. I do have live weather on and live time, so this is the weather in Melbourne at the time of recording. So this is 10 o'clock in the evening in the UK, so it's early morning in Melbourne. And it looks like a pretty misty morning. So the routine when we get to the runway, we're going to get lined up. There's a plane just coming in, look. Should we slow down and watch it come in? It's one of the AI aircraft, it's not another user. Very cool. So I did read part of World Update 8 is that we're going to see more air traffic, and that's certainly true so far. This looks quite busy, doesn't it? Look, they're queuing up down the taxiway. Is there any more nav lights we can see out there in the distance? I can't see anything coming in. Okay, so yeah, our routine for takeoff is going to be to accelerate along the runway, rotate at the appropriate speed, and then gear up, flaps up, autopilot on, and the aircraft should begin flying the standard instrument departure all on its own. Okay, so there's our runway. We're just getting straightened up. So, full throttle. I'm just going to ease the throttles forwards. So we're at max power now. Holding the centre line, but gently steering. And rotate. And plane is airborne. Gear up. Flaps up. And autopilot on. And the plane is now climbing for 250 knots. That's a typical warning we always get.
Too low, terrain.
Don't worry. So the plane is accelerating to 250 knots and following the standard instrument departure. If we zoom in a little bit on the map, you get to see it. We can actually watch this from outside at this point. It's a bit noisy at the back of the plane, isn't it? And obviously we're in that thick mist we saw around the airfield. So there's not going to be much to see for the first few minutes of the flight, so we may as well watch down here. So the plane is going to fly straight through this first waypoint and then turn right. Here it goes. The flight director is about to shoot off to the right. with a bit of luck. And there it goes. So the CDI, the course deviation indicator, reflects the flight plan because it's in FMS mode, so it's relative to the next waypoint. This is the course to the next waypoint, so obviously we're turning towards it, and this is where we are in relation to the line, so obviously the CDI is moving off to the right. You can see we're holding 250 knots, so the throttle is being, so we're still on max throttle. We could pull back now to toga or even to climb, so the rate of climb will not be as strong, so you can see the engines are coming down. So in the CRJ you only get to control you control the throttle yourself. The aircraft can't control the throttle, so the only means it has of keeping us at 250 knots for speed mode is by varying the pitch of the nose. So if we don't give it as much throttle, then it can't climb as steeply. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's just intercepting the course into Balak, or Albak, sorry. It will turn left again in a moment, and then it will turn right. So it's the autopilot's made a bit of a pig's ear of that, to be honest, but a human would have done it a bit more smoothly. Or if I had kept the speed down off the runway, so sort of 160, 170 knots, it would have obviously made a much tighter turn, so we wouldn't have had the correction. Excuse me. Okay, so we're climbing out now through the cloud. So obviously you can still see the display down here, so we're turning round. This is kind of a looping pattern, so we're in between the cloud layers at the moment. Looks quite spectacular, doesn't it? We're at 13,000 feet now, so we can accelerate. So we're going to move the target airspeed up to 280 knots. Actually, we could go for 300. There we go. So I've set the marker to 300. You can see the marker on the indicated airspeed ribbon. So in order to do that acceleration, the aircraft has lessened its climb rate. So it does that itself because we're in speed mode. Obviously it can't accelerate if it was already maxing out the pitch.
We are now serving sandwiches.
So at this point we're in quite a nice smooth climb. We can go and turn off the seatbelt sign. And we're pretty much good to go. So we'll go and enjoy the scenery, I guess, for the next few minutes. Whoa, there's some big weather systems. So at this point it's pretty much a watching game to see the aircraft climb. As we come through 18,000 feet it may start flashing on the... oh no, it hasn't. I thought this might flash. I'm not sure if they've fixed this. There's been a bug in it for a while actually. If we move this out of the way, you should be able to push this to flick it between standard. So if I was to change it, for example, yeah, it doesn't like it, look. Yeah, there's a small bug with the barometric pressure at the moment, but once you're above 18,000, the transition altitude varies around the world, but once you are through the transition level, you need to, or transition altitude, sorry, you need to change your QNH or barometric pressure to 1013 or 2992 depending on which scale you are using. All it ensures is that all aircraft above the transition altitude are working to the same scale in terms of their altitude. So when you are told to fly at a flight level, so above the transition altitude, you talk in terms of flight levels, not in terms of thousands of feet anymore. Just so you know, instantly when you hear it, we've got a master caution. Why have we got a master caution? Icing is happening. So we need to go and look at the anti-ice and turn on the countermeasures for it. Now we've got the message now saying that we are dealing with it. The ice countermeasures are switched on. And you can see the reason why. We've got minus 23 outside and we are in cloud. Obviously that's going to provide moisture, which is going to cause ice. But you can see the true air temperature, I think that is 0 centigrade, so yeah, we're having to be careful. If we climb another few thousand feet out of the cloud, hopefully, you can see the windscreen is beginning to ice up. So what we can do up here is go and turn these onto high, which will hopefully clear the ice away from the windscreen. So we'll just keep an eye on that over the next few minutes, and hopefully the aeroplane will sort itself out. You can see a little bit of ice has formed on the wiper. So yeah, we might be in one of the hottest countries in the world, but at altitude it's still minus something crazy degrees. And we're not going to get out of this cloud, I don't think, even another few thousand feet, although further along the trip we may travel out of it. So let's go and increase the range on the map. So we're now showing 80 miles out to the edge, 40 miles to the inner circle. We are the cross in the middle. We can increase the range even further so we can see the whole trip. And we've got a spurious waypoint which we're going to have to deal with. So there is a Casey waypoint that shouldn't be there. Now is that one of the ones that we programmed? Yes it is. We obviously chose a wrong one. Or it's wrong in the database. So I'm going to delete that and execute it. It's a pretty much straight line through there anyway. Well, that's interesting. So if we go and look at the plan, where did Casey come from? That's interesting. Did I mistakenly put it in? Anyway, that's why you keep an eye on things and check things. I mean, we would have seen it before we got there, but it just gives you some idea. It pays to know how to remove things and make changes to a flight plan. It's actually pretty straightforward in the CRJ, and the Airbus in Flight Simulator works very similarly, and so do the Boeing planes. If you want to insert a waypoint, you key the waypoint name in and select the waypoint you want it in front of on the left hand side, and it will insert it and push the rest down. If you want to remove one, you press delete and then select the waypoint you want to remove, and it will remove it and shift the rest up. Okay, so if we then go and zoom back in a little bit so we can make some sense of this. There's some nice pages of information on the CRJ. If we go to the index page, you can see lots of stuff about the internal systems like position. The legs page is probably the most useful in flight because it gives you the miles to go all the way through the journey. There's a progress page as well, which gives you an estimated time. So we're looking at about half an hour until we get to Canberra. So I'm going to leave this looking out of the window to watch our route. I think we can probably come off the icing now. Now, did you hear the engines actually raising pitch there? So that was actually taking some resource. Right, so I'm just trying to go so we got a nice view out of the window of Australia passing by beneath, and I'm going to go make a coffee while we're en route. So we need to think about top of descent in between Rumi and Tanta. So as soon as we get to Rumi, we'll start looking at descending. You can see that here on the elevation plot in Little Nav Map. We can descend a lot faster if we use air brakes, but this is obviously the most efficient route. So I'm going to leave that there and go make a coffee, and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. And we are overspeeding because we have reached top of climb. So we press F. Yeah, we only just started overspeeding because we must have been creeping up at like a knot a minute or something. So there we go. Lesson number 1, don't walk away from the flight deck to make a cup of coffee. I think we were overspeeding by about 3 or 4 knots. It was a bit crazy really. Okay, so we can see where we are on the flight plan. So it shouldn't take too long until we begin our descent. Just need to get past Rumi. While we're flying along, we could have a look around some of the systems on the aircraft. So you will notice there is a pink cross or magenta cross on the attitude indicator. That is the flight director. So in aircraft that have autopilots, in commercial aviation aircraft, you can see there's an FD button up here. If we press it, it goes away. If we switch it back on, when we pressed it, the autopilot switched off. Yeah? We want to go back to Nav Mode. So when we switched off the flight director, the autopilot switched off. So that was just illustrating for you. There are 2 parts to the system. There is the flight director and there is the autopilot. The flight director looks at the flight plan and figures out what the aeroplane needs to do. So the cross is the flight director saying, okay, we need to be going this direction. It's effectively figuring out the control inputs. The autopilot makes the aeroplane do what the flight director asks. So you can think of the flight director as a artificial human, reading the flight plan, looking at the instruments, figuring out what needs to be done, then the autopilot makes it happen. So it's kind of like the flight director says, we need to go that way. And the autopilot says, okay, give it a bit of aileron, give it a bit of elevator, we'll make it happen. So yeah, obviously when I turned off the flight director, the cross vanished, but then the autopilot's got nobody to listen to, and it can't have that. So it says, okay, I'm not flying the plane anymore if you're not going to tell me where we're going. There's a few switches in this aircraft that are inoperative, I guess you could say. Yeah, things like the sky cam, it kind of works. So if we go switch this on, you get to see the camera out into the galley. It's just a picture. You can see it at daytime or nighttime mode. You can choose options for this. You get a couple of different pictures, and then you get the picture of the guy that owns Aerosoft, that make the or the managing director, I should say, that make that pay the developers that made this aeroplane. So there you go. So yeah, it's not really study level. The various fuses don't work. The breakers, I should say, not fuses. So the circuit breakers. I'm not sure if any of the stuff up here works. Oh, that does apparently. How interesting. I'm not going to click anything because I don't want to go and mess the aeroplane up. That's interesting. So that's obviously for fueling the aircraft. But yeah, the rest of it, it's all standard stuff really. Okay. You will see on most aircraft of this type where you have a pilot and a co-pilot, the controls are mirrored. Yeah. So you get lighting, navigation systems and the MFDs, lighting, navigation systems and the MFDs. It's an exact mirror. We've got exactly the same switch as the other side. The only one that isn't mirrored is the master control panel for the autopilot. In terms of the central console, this is usually for the comm radio configuration, so if you were talking to ATC you would be using this to switch radio channels. You've obviously got the ECAM buttons, so those provide the various displays for the engineering, so we can see, let's have a look at them, we've got some time. ECS gives us the engine control systems. Hydraulics. Oh, so it's over here, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. So yeah, ECS is the environment control system. Oh no, it is the engine, sorry. Hydraulics, electrical systems, the fuel systems, so you know the various pumps and where the fuel is coming from in terms of the tanks, for example. You've got the flight control systems, so you can see where the inputs are going, where the plane is levelling itself, for example, you know, where the actuators are being used. And you've got anti-ice, obviously we're not actually using at the moment. Got the door configuration, so you can see the status of the doors around the aircraft. You've got various other bits and pieces that you can mess around with, like menus to go and configure the aircraft. I'm not going to go anywhere near them because I don't know my way around them well enough to get back out if I get us into a mess. The MCDU you've already seen, it's pretty good. So for the basic operation you can just set your departure and arrivals and manipulate the legs. You can go and set up VNAV, so you can get the aircraft to follow the vertical path through the sky for you. And we need to keep an eye on this because we're getting close to our descent point. It's only about 40 miles away now. Okay. But yeah, I actually like the CRJ quite a lot. It's good fun to fly. Should turn that off now. It's quite amusing actually. The aircraft in the installation folders, you can find these pictures. So there's nothing to stop you putting whatever pictures you want in here. Which would be quite amusing, I guess. Something obviously you can't do on the real aircraft, but you can do in the simulator to get this out of the way of the switches. You could move the yoke up and down, which is quite amusing really. How are we doing? Engines aren't quite, or the throttle levers aren't quite level with each other. I'm just going to straighten that up. So we can zoom in a bit now on the range, and we can see our top of descent is coming soon. And we will start preparing to descend. So what we could do to make this a bit easier, if we go, say we want to descend at 280 knots until we get to 11,000 feet. We'll use speed mode to descend, which is a very safe way to do it because then you can't overspeed. So what we'll do is, say we go on speed mode, we could do it now. Yeah, it's not going to allow us, look, because we haven't set a target altitude that's different than our actual altitude at the moment. If we said we can do it now, it won't really hurt. If we come down to 12,000 feet. So let's just check before we do anything. Let's go and look at the legs page. At Rumi they want to set 290, then at Tanta 192. Yeah, so we'll come down to 19,200 for Tanta. So 19,000. .200 or flight level 192. So remember I talked about flight levels above 18,000 or above the transition altitude. So flight levels are in hundreds of feet, so it's 192 is 19,200 feet. Okay, so we are at the point now where we need to be heading down anyway to flight level 192. So we have the target set. We have the speed mode now because we have diverged on the altitude, descending at 290 knots. If we descend at 280, you will see it will stop going down because it can't get to 280 knots without lifting the nose. So what we're going to do is drop or cut the engines back to idle, and the aircraft is now going to fall like a stone. So we can introduce more thrust to give ourselves a more gentle descent. Yeah, so you can see the descent rate here. So at idle we were basically able to fall towards the floor at 4,000 feet a minute without accelerating. But we can govern our rate of descent using the throttles in speed mode. An alternative way to do it is to go to vertical speed mode. So if we say vertical speed mode and we want to come down at say 1.5, that means 1,500 feet a minute. Now we have to use the throttles ourselves to control speed. Yeah, so the plane is coming down like a metronome at 1,500 feet a minute, and we're using the throttle directly to control airspeed. Versus speed mode, where we tell it the speed and the aeroplane changes pitch to keep us at that speed. So by the time we get to Tanta, which we can zoom in a bit further to help us out. See, at the rate we are going to get to our target altitude just before Tanta. That's what this little marker is. If I slow down, it's not making a great deal of difference because yeah, if we were in speed mode, you'd see this happen. Let's go for speed mode. Now if I cut the engines to idle, see it goes steeper, and the point we will get to the target altitude is drawing in towards us. If we speed up, or if we put more throttle in, the nose comes up to stop us overspeeding, and the target zooms off into the distance. So I've come back to idle, and it's falling back again. So if we go to vertical speed mode, we can control that. Yeah, so we can go at 1,500 feet a minute. We'll see where it gets to, and it's just before Tanta we're going to get to the right altitude. So then we just get to control our speed with the throttle. Remember, we only need to be at 250 knots indicated airspeed at 10,000 feet, so we've got a long way to go yet. So we're aiming for 19,200 feet at Tanta, and then you can already see we need to be below 17,000 at Polly. Now let's see if there's any more than that. So it's just saying nope, below 17,000, and then we can get a look. So we got then 16 miles to get down. Well, we've got to be above 7,000. So it's above all the way until we get to Mombi. Yeah, and by then you're into the approach for Canberra, and if we show information for Canberra, we can find out that its elevation is nearly 2,000 feet. So we're looking at 4,500 feet for the beginning of the ILS, which you can see at Mombi it wants us at 4,760, or above 4,760. So a little bit past that, we'll be looking at about 4,500 for the beginning of the ILS feathers. So if we go for 5,000 for Mombi, we should be good. So we're getting there slowly. Now we can see true air temperature is 1 degree centigrade. I'm just going to check what TAT stands for. Just me being paranoid about this. I don't think it is true air temperature. TAT, aircraft temperature. It's total air temperature, not true air temperature. So the total air temperature is the one you're watching in terms of icing. So we're just coming, that klaxon you heard was us coming within 1,000 feet of our target altitude. So you can see our aeroplane is about to cross over where it anticipated we would get to 19,200 feet, which is happening. So the autopilot will automatically take us to altitude hold mode when we get there. So we know we need to get below 17,000 feet now, so let's go for 16,000. We'll program it in. Remember, we're in altitude hold, so nothing's going to happen at the moment. So we'll wait till we get to Tanta. Let me shorten this up so we can see what's happening. And then we'll go vertical speed mode. To come down at the rate we need to. Remember, we'll be able to see a marker, so we know if we're going to get there in time, and we can adjust the throttle along the way. Okay, so aircraft's going to start turning left. We can go to vertical speed mode, and we can roll the knob to say we want to come down at, say, here comes the marker, 1,600 feet a minute. So we'll go for 1,700 feet a minute, and we'll cut the throttles because obviously we're descending quite quickly, otherwise the airplane will start accelerating. So it's just a question of learning how vertical speed works on the master control panel. Maybe using speed mode from time to time as well, and using them in concert with each other with nav mode as well for the aircraft to follow the standard approach route. You can see we've come below 18,000 feet, so the barometric pressure calibration number is flashing. So normally you would press this, but it doesn't appear to work anymore. There's something bust in it. So we can press B, and that fixes it for us. So yeah, that seems to be a little bit broken in this aircraft at the moment. So we're just coming down to 17,000 feet, we're about to drop through it. So we want to be 11,000 feet for go man, so let's go for 11,000 feet. Whoops. We're starting to accelerate, so I'm going to put the air brakes out. Notice where I'm changing speeds and diving, the aeroplane has deviated slightly from the flight plan, but it's regaining it. So I just gave it a tiny bit of air brake there. You can see the plane is accelerating at this rate of descent. So it's not unusual if you sit watching out of the side of an aircraft, on a civil aviation aircraft, or commercial aviation I should say, and watch the air brakes on descent. You'll quite often see them just crack open. And it's obviously where the pilots are managing the descent. We do need to get rid of some speed though, so we're going to go for a bit more speed brake. Because we need to be at 250 knots when we come down to 10,000 feet, and we're getting closer to 10,000 feet. So you can see the indicated airspeed is bleeding off slowly. Have a look outside. Just about to go back down into the clouds. But down at low altitude the clouds aren't particularly cold. You can see it's 13 degrees outside. It's a lovely day in Canberra by the look of it. So speed is bleeding off. That's telling us we're within 1,000 feet of our target, 11,000. We need to be above 7,000 at Honey, so we'll get ready to do that as well. You'll see that we've automatically gone to altitude hold mode for 11,000, so we are freed up now to change this now to, we'll go for 8,000 at Honey. And we go to vertical speed mode, come down again. We don't need to come down as fast, but we can go for 2,000 feet a minute. There we go. We just need to get no faster than 250 knots. So we'll move the target for this so we've got a nice handy reference on the indicated airspeed of where 250 knots is. So by moving the speed marker we can see it easily. So we're going to pull the engines back to idle. That stops us go faster than 250. We're just about to come through 10,000 feet. So from now on 250 is our limit. Okay, we'll zoom in again on the nav screen. Let's go and check while we're just coasting in here at what the ILS frequency is. It's 109.50 for Canberra. So we'll go and check that on the radio page. 10950 is already programmed on Nav 1, which is great. And we're coming down to 8,000 feet at Honey. It wants us down to 210 knots for daily. So we're going to leave the engines on idle and watch the speed scrub off. And at this point we can increase the range here. Can we see on the legs the target altitudes beyond Honey? Yes, we can. Look, so daily we need to be 6,600 feet and 210 knots. So let's get ready. Altitude 6,600, vertical speed down again. So we can tune this to get there just in time. We're already below 210 knots, so we can open the engines up a little bit. We're not going down quite steeply enough. That's about it. So we're watching the indicated airspeed. We don't want to go above 210. Once we make the turn at Menzie, I am going to switch to the radio instead of the flight plan, so the we will be able to see the symbology for the ILS. So we're in the cloud at the moment. There's nothing to see outside. It's a nice cloudy day. So we're going to begin bringing the flaps out as well. So we've got 10-mile range on the map display, just for reference. So we're beginning to turn. So what we can do now is change the Nav Source. Oh, we didn't arm the steering earlier. That's interesting. So we're changing the Nav Source. We now see the symbology for the approach. So we'll leave the plane following the turn, and we will go and turn on the landing lights. And we'll turn on the seatbelt sign. Oh, it already was on. Or I think that's the auto. Yeah, there you go. And if I turned off the autopilot, no, it's still on. Doesn't seem keen on turning though, does it? Okay, I'm going to take over at this point. Oh, have we got a problem? So, we are slightly above the glide slope, and obviously you can see on the map, slightly to the right. So we'll just correct that. And we're going too fast. So we'll check out the air brakes. Just go fast by a tiny bit. So gear down. The reason for that we've got such a low speed limit is because we're using the flaps already to arrest our speed for the descent. So let's just correct this. So we're gonna I'm just going to make this so you can just see these instruments as well as me. So we're just coming in. We're slightly to the right of the glide slope still, but that's fine. And you're starting to see the runway there coming out of the mist in front of us. That's interesting that the autopilot didn't make the final turn. Oh, it would be because I switched over to radio mode. So it was no longer following the plan, which is fine. Okay, going for the next level of flaps. Okay, so now we're just watching the glide slope indicators and the localizer on the CDI
1000
and trying to bring them slowly into the centre. We're not panicking about doing anything quickly. Bringing the throttle in. We don't want to get much slower than about 130, 140 knots in the CRJ. Obviously, as we bring the nose up now to meet the glide slope, the plane's going to try and slow down, so I'm opening the throttle gently.
500.
A tiny bit below the glide slope, so we just nose up gently.
300.
Sync rate.
200.
Sync rate.
So at this point you're just visual with the runway. We're a little bit low, but we can correct for that.
100. 50. 40. 30.
So engines off,
10.
and we're down. So there you go. There's not really a lot more to say about the CRJ. You saw there a mistake from me on approach. I should have left the guidance on Nav Mode using the FMS, or the flight plan. I switched over to radio without using approach, and it didn't know what to do, so it just kept on in a straight line. It basically went into wing leveling mode. But yeah, we were able to just correct for that and land. So yeah, it was pretty straightforward really. So there we go, we have landed in Canberra. I don't know why I was expecting to see more city on the way in, but I guess Canberra is in the middle of nowhere, isn't it? I saw an interesting documentary about Canberra. That it was built pretty much because Melbourne and Sydney couldn't decide between themselves which would become the capital city, so they built a brand new capital city and had a famous architect design it for them. It's an impressive terminal building over there, isn't it? But anyway, I'm going to save you the taxi back, and I'm going to stop recording there. So there you go. This is the CRJ 550 in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and we did a flight from Melbourne to Canberra. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be flying again soon. I'll see you soon.